It's 2 a.m. You're staring at the ceiling again. The blue light from your phone is casting a pale, sickly glow across the room. You just got the news. Another rejection. Another project collapsed. Another relationship that started with so much promise, only to disintegrate into the exact same familiar mess. You let the phone drop onto your chest. You close your eyes, and there it is. That familiar, heavy, suffocating question that always creeps in when the silence gets too loud. Why me? Why is it that no matter what I do, I always see failure? You don't just ask it. You feel it in the pit of your stomach, this heavy sinkhole of absolute certainty that the universe has singled you out. You look at your peers, and everything seems to just glide for them. They put in half the effort, they get double the reward. You claw your way up the mountain, your fingernails bleeding. You do everything right. You put in the hours. You follow the rules. And right when you're about to reach the summit, the rock crumbles beneath your feet, and you fall. Again. This is exactly how the illusion of why you always have bad luck begins to take root in your mind. It doesn't start with a massive tragedy. It starts with this agonizing drip, drip, drip of near misses and almost theirs. Think about the last time you tried something new. You finally built up the momentum. You told yourself, this time it's going to be different. You put your heart completely on the line. And what happened? The exact worst-case scenario. The one tiny variable you couldn't control went wrong. And in that moment, when the disaster struck, you didn't even fight it. You didn't get angry. You just slumped your shoulders and smiled this bitter, exhausted smile. Because of course it failed. That's just your luck. Pause for a second. Let that sink in. Notice how quickly you accepted it. Notice how comfortable you are with the failure. When things go wrong, you don't look at the mechanics of the situation. You don't look at the data or the variables. You look at the sky and you blame this invisible, mystical force. You wrap yourself in the comforting blanket of being the tragic protagonist. And this is why the narrative of why you always have bad luck is so incredibly dangerous. It stops being an observation and becomes a deeply ingrained identity. You start scanning your environment for proof that you are cursed. When you drop your coffee in the morning, it's not because you were rushing. It's because the universe is sending you a sign. When a pitch fails, it's not because the strategy was flawed. It's because you are fundamentally doomed. You are experiencing failure. Constant, relentless, exhausting failure. And your immediate response is to ask the darkest question of all. Does this mean I should quit? You sit there on the edge of your bed, feeling the weight of the world crushing your shoulders, and you genuinely believe that these failures are stop signs. You think the universe is pulling you aside and whispering that you should just give up. You think your bad luck is a cosmic intervention meant to keep you safely in your place. Wrong. You are deeply, profoundly wrong. And nobody is going to tell you this, but I will. The discomfort you are feeling, the endless loop of face-planting into the dirt, is not a supernatural curse. See how the belief in why you always have bad luck operates. It uses your pain to mask the truth. It uses your exhaustion to hide the fact that you are right on the verge of the only thing that actually matters. You think you are cursed, but what you actually are is untested. You are standing at the threshold of the forge, complaining that the fire is burning you, completely oblivious to the fact that the heat is the only mechanism that can actually harden the steel. Let's rewind the tape. Let's look at the trail of wreckage you call your life, because you need to see the actual machinery of this curse you claim to have. You decide it's finally time to get your life together. You're going to build that side hustle. You're going to put your work out there. You spend weeks researching. You buy the domain name. You design the logo. You feel that initial rush of dopamine, that intoxicating high of pure potential. And then you launch. You put it out into the world. You hit publish. And the universe responds with absolute, deafening silence. 0 views. 0 sales. Or worse, the one client who actually showed interest suddenly ghosts you without any explanation. And what do? You don't analyze your marketing. You don't tweak your pitch. You don't send follow-up emails. You close your laptop. You stare at the black screen, let out a heavy sigh, and you whisper, "See? Nothing ever works out for me." Because deep down, you were scanning the horizon for the first sign of friction, just waiting for permission to stop. This is exactly how the narrative of why you always have bad luck becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You mistake the standard entry fee of success for a personalized eviction notice. Let's look at another one. You decide to get your physical and mental health in order. You commit. You're waking up early. Day 1 goes great. Day 2 is sore, but fine. Day 4, you step off a curb wrong and twist your ankle. Or your car gets a flat tire on the way to the gym. Or you catch a bizarre, out-of-nowhere flu that knocks you out for a week. An act of God. Pure, unadulterated misfortune. And you stop. You don't modify the routine. You don't focus on nutrition while you heal. You don't do upper body workouts. You abandon the entire identity of someone trying to get healthier. You go right back to the baseline. Because you believe that an obstacle is a cosmic red light. And this is why you always have bad luck is such a comforting, insidious lie. It takes the statistical inevitability of getting sick or injured and turns it into a mystical decree that you shouldn't even bother trying. Pause for a second. Look at the pattern. You start saving money. Really saving. You're being disciplined. Then the car breaks down. The transmission blows. And the exact amount you saved is the exact amount the mechanic needs to fix it. I'm cursed, you say. Every time I get ahead, something drags me back. So you stop saving. You go back to spending recklessly because, hey, what's the point? The universe is just going to take it anyway, right? Wrong. Cars break down. Transmissions fail. That is not a curse. That is thermodynamics. That is the reality of owning a machine. The emergency fund did exactly what it was supposed to do. It caught the emergency. But you don't see it as a victory of preparation. You see it as proof of your punishment. See how why you always have bad luck operates in the shadows? It takes your actual victories, surviving a financial hit without going into debt, and paints them black so they look like defeats. You do this in relationships. You do this in your career. You do this with your daily habits. You hit the wall. The exact same wall that everyone else hits. The wall of friction, of boredom, of things outside your control going sideways. And instead of realizing that consistency is the key to climbing over that wall, you look at the bricks and decide the universe built them specifically to trap you. You ask yourself, does whatever I do ending in failure mean I should quit? Every single time the wind blows against you. But nobody is going to tell you this. The wind blows against everyone. You just take it personally. Look closely at those moments we just tore apart. You think you are looking at a graveyard of dreams destroyed by cosmic interference. You think you are staring at undeniable proof that the universe actively hates you. But pull back the lens. Zoom out. Look at the timeline of every single one of those so-called failures. You started. You made a little progress. You hit a localized pocket of severe turbulence. And then you stopped. Here is what you don't want to hear. The gut-wrenching, deeply uncomfortable truth that you have been dodging for years, hiding behind fate to avoid looking in the mirror. You do not have a bad luck problem. You have a quitting problem disguised as a tragic destiny. You are taking the universally agonizing friction of human growth and mislabeling it as a personalized curse. And this is exactly how the narrative of why you always have bad luck works to keep you paralyzed. It gives you a beautifully tragic, socially acceptable excuse to drop the weights right when the burn actually starts to change your muscles. Think about the trajectory of any worthwhile pursuit. You decide to learn a complex new skill. The first week is fun. It's exciting. Your brain gets cheap dopamine from the sheer act of simply starting something new. But by week 4, the novelty completely evaporates. The concepts get dense. You sit at your desk, staring at a problem that looks like absolute gibberish. You try to execute, and you fail horribly. You look stupid. You feel incompetent. And this is the exact micro moment where your shadow takes the wheel. Instead of seeing that incompetence as temporary data, instead of seeing the failure as the exact puzzle you need to solve, you lean back. You let out that familiar, victimized sigh. You tell yourself, I'm just not wired for this. Every time I try to do something ambitious, everything falls apart. And you close the laptop. You walk away. Because deep down, you prefer the romantic tragedy of being uniquely cursed over the mundane, unsexy reality of just needing to try harder tomorrow. And this is why you always have bad luck is the ultimate psychological escape hatch. It completely absolves you of the heavy lifting of consistency. Pause. Let that breathe. It absolves you of the responsibility of consistency. You look at the mess and ask yourself, whatever I do, I see failure. Does that mean I should quit? Wrong. You aren't seeing failure. You are seeing the entry fee. You are seeing the toll booth on the highway to competence, and you are wildly mistaking it for a concrete roadblock. Every time you hit that toll booth and turn your car around, you force yourself to start over at zero. You live your entire life in the brutal, exhausting beginner phase of everything you try. You never break through to the other side where momentum actually takes over. You just keep resetting the clock. And then you look at your life, a relentless series of aborted attempts, half-finished projects, and abandoned habits. And you have the audacity to blame luck. See how why you always have bad luck operates in your psyche? It blinds you to your own hand yanking the emergency brake. You think you are failing, but you aren't failing. You are just refusing to be consistent. You are demanding the rewards of a veteran while throwing the tantrums of a novice. Stop blaming the universe. The universe doesn't care about you enough to curse you. You are orchestrating your own demise simply by refusing to show up the day after the illusion of easy success shatters. You think your brain is protecting you when you quit. You think it's being entirely logical. You look at your past, the broken relationships, the failed side hustles, the bank accounts that never grow, and your brain runs a cold, hard calculation. It looks at the wreckage and says, look at the data. Whatever I do, I see failure. Does that mean I should quit? Yes. It feels rational to stop trying when trying only seems to bring pain. But it's not rational. It's a psychological infection. And this is exactly how the illusion of why you always have bad luck takes root in your neurological wiring. It entirely rewrites your baseline reality. In the 1960s, a psychologist named Martin Seligman discovered something terrifying about the mammalian brain. He called it learned helplessness. He put dogs in a partition cage and delivered mild, unavoidable electric shocks. At first, the dogs did exactly what you do when you start a new project. They fought. They scrambled. They frantically tried to find a way out. But the shocks were completely out of their control. After enough random shocks, Seligman changed the experiment. He opened the partition. He gave them a clear, easy escape route. All they had to do was step over a tiny barrier to be free from the pain. But the dogs? They didn't move. They just lay down on the floor and took the shocks. They had learned that their actions had zero effect on their reality. They had been conditioned to believe they were entirely powerless. Pause for a second. Let that visual sink in. They believed they were doomed, even when the door was wide open. And this is why you always have bad luck is not a cosmic curse, but a psychological cage you built for yourself. You are the dog on the floor. You tried to build a life, and the economy crashed. Shock. You gave your heart to someone, and they betrayed you. Shock. You tried to build a new habit, and a family emergency derailed your week. Shock. You experienced random, uncontrollable friction in the past, and your brain drew a lethal, permanent conclusion. My actions do not matter. So now, when a new opportunity presents itself, when the cage door swings wide open and the path to freedom is staring you right in the face, you don't even bother to stand up. You look at the open door. You look at the potential, and you just lie back down and wait for the lightning to strike. You tell yourself it's pointless. You tell yourself the universe is just baiting a trap to hurt you again. See how why you always have bad luck operates to keep you perfectly paralyzed? It makes you completely blind to your own agency. It convinces you that the barrier is 10 feet high when it's actually just an inch off the ground. You whisper to yourself, "Whatever I do, I see failure." But what your shadow is really saying is, "I am terrified to find out what happens if I actually give it everything. I have and still fail." Because if you try with absolute, relentless consistency and you still fall short, then you can't blame luck anymore. Then you have to look in the mirror. And that vulnerability terrifies you. So you choose the comfort of the cage. You choose the familiar sting of the shock. You abandon the only mechanism that could actually save you. Nobody is going to tell you this, but here is the brutal reality. No consistency is the key you threw away because you were too scared to put it in the lock. You decided the game was rigged against you, so you sat down on the board, folded your arms, and simply refused to roll the dice. But let's talk about the payoff. Because nobody does anything, especially not repeatedly sabotaging their own life, without getting a massive psychological reward out of it. There is a reason you cling to this narrative of being cursed like a lifesaver in a storm. You sit there looking at another month of zero progress. You look at the pile of bills. You look at the empty DMs. And you think the pain of failure is the worst part. Wrong. The pain of failure is the price you happily pay for the ultimate prize. Absolute, total absolution. Here is what you don't want to hear. This is the dark, rotting core of the issue. The belief in why you always have bad luck is the most comfortable, luxurious excuse you will ever invent. It is a psychological get-out-of-jail-free card that you play against yourself every single day. Think about the alternative. If you admit that your failures are not the result of a vindictive universe, what are you left with? You are left with the horrifying realization that your life is a direct result of your own choices. You are left with the cold, hard fact that your lack of consistency is the exact reason you are standing still. And that is terrifying, because if it's your fault, you have to do something about it. If it's your fault, you have to get up tomorrow and try again, and this time, you have to try harder. But if you are cursed, if the stars themselves have aligned to ensure your destruction, well then, you can just lie on the couch. See how why you always have bad luck operates to keep you safe from the terrifying burden of responsibility? It takes the pressure off. You get to be the tragic hero in a story where you are destined to lose. You get to throw your hands up, look at the sky, and say, I tried, but the universe just won't let me win. You get to ask, whatever I do, I see failure. Does that mean I should quit? And then you answer your own question with a resounding yes. Because if you don't quit, if you actually push through the friction and the boredom and the setbacks, you risk finding out exactly what you are capable of. And what if you are capable of greatness? What if you actually have the power to build the life you want, but you've just been too lazy, too undisciplined, and too scared to put in the work? That is the shadow truth you are hiding from. The fear of your own potential is far more paralyzing than the fear of failure. You tell yourself you are a victim of circumstance. You tell yourself that no consistency is the key because you've never been consistent long enough to see the lock turn. You dabble. You flirt with success. You put one toe in the water, and the second it gets cold, you sprint back to the beach and scream that the ocean hates you. Pause for a second. Read that again. You sprint back to the beach and scream that the ocean hates you. You are weaponizing your own comfort against your ambition. You use the concept of bad luck as a shield against the brutal, unsexy reality of compounding effort. You would rather be perfectly miserable in a reality where you have no control than face the terrifying possibility that you are the architect of your own mediocrity. You would rather be a victim of fate than a failure by choice. Let's zoom in on the exact microscopic moment you actually decide to quit. Because you never just say, I'm lazy and this is hard, so I'm stopping. That would completely shatter your fragile ego. Instead, you dress your surrender up in a spiritual costume. You call it reading the signs. You've been working on a new endeavor for 3 straight weeks. You're exhausted, but you're making real progress. Then, at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, you hit a concrete wall. Your software crashes and deletes hours of work. Or an email arrives from a gatekeeper saying your project is delayed indefinitely. The momentum violently snaps. And what happens next is crucial. You don't open a new document. You don't start troubleshooting. You don't draft a follow-up email. You push your chair back. You look up at the empty room, let out a hollow laugh, and you whisper, well, there it is. The universe is telling me to stop, because quitting on your own feels weak. But quitting because the cosmos commanded it, that feels profound. And this is exactly how the lie of why you always have bad luck provides a philosophical excuse to completely abandon your responsibilities. Stop. Look at what you just did. You took a standard, mundane logistical problem and elevated it to a divine intervention. You actively hunted for friction so you could interpret it as a stop sign. Then, you take it a step further. You go to your friends. You sit across from them, and you don't present the situation as a puzzle to be solved. You present it as a devastating tragedy. You heavily edit the story to make yourself look completely powerless against fate. And then you ask the ultimate manipulative question, whatever I do, I see failure. Does that mean I should quit? You look at them with heavy eyes, pretending you are genuinely torn. But you aren't torn. You are begging them to say yes. You are waiting for them to tilt their head with sympathy and say, maybe it's just not meant to be. Let it go. And the moment they say it, a massive wave of relief washes over you. You drink that validation like water in a desert. Because you weren't asking for advice. You were recruiting an accomplice to help you murder your own ambition. See how why you always have bad luck operates to manipulate the people around you? You use them to co-sign your own cowardice. Here is what nobody is going to tell you. The friction you are running away from is the exact mechanism of growth. The resistance isn't a sign to stop. The resistance is the literal weight on the bar. You completely ignore the fact that no consistency is the key, and instead, you search for a magical shortcut that doesn't exist. You think the failure means you are weak. You completely miss the reality that you will get stronger in whatever you do day by day, but only if you actually stay under the tension. Retyping the lost document builds your mental endurance. Finding a side door when the gatekeeper says no builds your ruthless resourcefulness. Every time you interpret a normal obstacle as a curse, you are actively refusing to adapt. You are taking the exact pressure required to turn carbon into a diamond and complaining that it's too dark in the dirt. And this is why you always have bad luck is the perfect rationalization for a life of quiet, miserable mediocrity. You're sitting on the couch. The glow of the screen illuminates your face in the dark. You're scrolling, not looking for anything in particular, just numbing out to avoid the silence. And then you see it. A post from someone you vaguely know, or maybe a complete stranger. They just launched the exact business you gave up on. They just hit the fitness milestone you abandoned. They just got the exact promotion you convinced yourself was statistically impossible. They post a perfectly lit photo with a long, glowing caption about how blessed they are, how everything eventually just fell into place. You stop scrolling. Your stomach drops into a bottomless pit. A cold, heavy resentment washes over you. You don't feel happy for them. You feel a deep, agonizing confirmation of your own inadequacy. You look at their polished success, and you immediately hold it up against your own messy, jagged timeline of failures. And this is exactly where the poison of why you always have bad luck seeps deep into your bloodstream. You look at them, and your shadow begins to construct a massive, elaborate fantasy. You tell yourself they must be the chosen ones. You convince yourself that the universe laid out a red carpet for them. You imagine that their software never crashed, that they never got rejected, that they woke up every day bursting with motivation and the world simply bowed to their desires. Wrong. Stop right there. Let that delusion shatter. What you are looking at is a highlight reel. You are looking at the trophy ceremony. You are entirely, willfully blind to the thousands of hours they spent grinding in the dark. You don't see the mornings they woke up exhausted, looked at their own chaotic mess, and kept going anyway. You don't see their failures because they didn't stop when they failed. They just absorbed the brutal hit and took another step. But you weaponize their victory against yourself. You are in the middle of reading their post. You read the part where they write, "It was a long, hard journey." But you mentally erase that sentence. You skim right past the struggle and focus entirely on the reward. You do this on purpose. If you acknowledge their struggle, you have to acknowledge your own lack of it. So you rewrite their history in your mind to protect your ego. You say, they had funding. They had connections. They don't have my anxiety. They don't have my unique, insurmountable problems. This is how why you always have bad luck forces you to build a shrine to your own disadvantages. You curate a private museum of all the reasons you can't succeed, and you charge yourself admission every single day. You look at the gap between you and them. You feel the sting of envy. But instead of letting that envy fuel you, instead of saying, "If they can do it, I can do it," you let it paralyze you. You sit there, illuminated by the screen, and you whisper that exact same toxic question, "Whatever I do, I see failure. Does that mean I should quit?" And you use their post as the final nail in the coffin of your own ambition. You use their success as the ultimate proof of your curse. Nobody is going to tell you this, but here is the uncomfortable truth. They are not luckier than you. They are just better at eating dirt. See how why you always have bad luck operates to keep you perfectly small? If you admit that they succeeded because they simply outworked you, because they refused to surrender to the friction, your entire victim identity collapses. So, you label them lucky, and you label yourself cursed. It is a psychological defense mechanism designed specifically to excuse your own surrender. You completely ignore the foundational law of reality. You forget that no consistency is the key that locks you inside this cage of mediocrity. You think they were born strong. You don't want to accept the absolute fact that you will get stronger in whatever you do day by day, but only if you actually stay in the arena long enough to take the punches. You want the strength without the lifting. You want the resilience without the tragedy. Pause for a second. Think about the staggering arrogance of that. You expect the universe to hand you a flawless victory on your first or second attempt, and when it hands you a standard, entry-level obstacle instead, you throw a tantrum and quit. Every time you compare your gritty, aborted Chapter 1 to someone else's Chapter 20, you feed the monster. You validate the lie of why you always have bad luck by intentionally misinterpreting how success is actually built. You forget that the person holding the trophy failed 10 times more than you did. The only difference is they didn't take it personally. Let's strip away the romance of success and look at what the actual work looks like. It's day 47 of your new routine. You wake up. The alarm sounds exactly as obnoxious as it did on day 1. You sit at your desk, or you step into the gym, or you make the cold calls. You do the exact same boring, repetitive, exhausting actions you did yesterday. And then, you look at the results. Nothing. The needle hasn't moved a single millimeter. The scale is exactly the same. The bank account is entirely stagnant. The audience is still zero. You stare at the blank screen, and that familiar, creeping coldness wraps around your chest. You feel the heavy, suffocating weight of the plateau. And you ask yourself that ultimate, self-sabotaging question. Whatever I do, I see failure. Does that mean I should quit? Because to your dopamine-addicted brain, this quiet flatline feels identical to a devastating crash. And this is exactly where the trap of why you always have bad luck is absolutely lethal. It operates in the deafening silence of the plateau. You think bad luck is a lightning strike or a dramatic explosion. It isn't. Bad luck, as you have defined it, is just the quiet, unsexy gap between your initial effort and your eventual adaptation. You look at the lack of immediate fireworks, and your shadow immediately classifies it as a universal rejection. You lean back in your chair. You let out a long, heavy breath. You tell yourself, I've been trying so hard, and nothing is happening. I am putting in the work, but I keep hitting a wall. The universe just doesn't want this for me. Wrong. The universe doesn't care about your artificial timeline. Here is what nobody is going to tell you. True progress feels exactly like failure in the short term. You are swinging a heavy axe at a massive, ancient oak tree. You hit it 100 times, and the bark barely even splinters. To the untrained eye, to the victim mindset, that looks like absolute failure. That looks like you are swinging wildly at an indestructible, cursed wall. But you aren't. You are weakening the microscopic, structural integrity of the wood with every single strike. When you sit there and complain about why you always have bad luck, you are literally throwing the axe down on swing 99. You walk away from the tree, rubbing your blistered hands, telling everyone who will listen that the forest was rigged against you from the start. You completely misunderstand the mechanism of growth. You forget that no consistency is the key that you fundamentally refuse to turn. You want the tree to fall on the first swing, so you never have to develop calluses. Listen to me. The resistance of the wood is the only thing building the muscle in your shoulders. You complain about the heavy, suffocating friction, completely oblivious to the absolute biological fact that you will get stronger in whatever you do day by day. The friction isn't the obstacle keeping you from the goal. The friction is the forge where you are being made capable of holding the goal. See how why you always have bad luck operates to keep you permanently weak? It convinces you that the forge is a torture chamber. Every time you sit there on day 47, feeling completely invisible, feeling entirely unrewarded, and you choose to do the boring work anyway, that is the exact moment the curse breaks. But you never stay long enough to see it. You see the flat line, you call it destiny, and you sprint right back to the starting line. You constantly choose the fleeting comfort of starting over instead of surviving the crucible of the middle. Now, let's hold the mirror up entirely. No more hiding behind fate or the universe. Look directly at your own hands. You say you want the success, the relationship, the peace of mind. You say it out loud to anyone who asks. You write it in your journals. But watch what happens when you actually start getting close. Watch your own behavior when the risk of actually succeeding becomes real. You're a few months into a project. It's working. You're actually gaining traction. The numbers are going up. You finally have a client who pays on time. The relationship is stable. There's no drama. And for once, the person actually treats you with respect. And what do? You feel a tight, gnawing anxiety in your chest. It doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like impending doom. You start waiting for the other shoe to drop. You start looking for cracks in the foundation. And when you don't find any, you grab a hammer. You pick a fight over absolutely nothing just to feel the familiar rush of conflict. You randomly decide to change the entire business model that was already working because you had a feeling. You stop returning the client's emails because you feel overwhelmed by the pressure of delivering on your own potential. You actively, meticulously sabotage the exact thing you claimed you wanted. And then, when it all comes crashing down around you, you look at the rubble, let out a massive sigh of relief, and say, "See? I knew it wouldn't last. That's just my luck." This is the darkest, most uncomfortable truth about why you always have bad luck. It operates as a self-inflicted wound. Stop for a second. Read that again. A self-inflicted wound. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are a hostage to your own comfort zone. You are terrified of success because success requires a completely new identity. It requires you to be responsible, to be consistent, to show up even when you don't feel like it. Failure? Failure is easy. Failure is a worn-out, comfortable old sweater you can slip right back into. When you fail, nobody expects anything from you anymore. You get to be the tragic, misunderstood hero again. And so, you ask the universe, whatever I do, I see failure. Does that mean I should quit? But you aren't asking the universe. You are asking your own shadow for permission to run back to the familiar darkness. Nobody is going to tell you this, but here is the brutal reality. You are addicted to the cycle of starting over. The chaotic high of a new beginning is the only dopamine you know how to process. The slow, boring, relentless grind of actual maintenance terrifies you. See how why you always have bad luck operates to keep you perfectly, predictably miserable? You orchestrate the disaster so you don't have to face the terrifying burden of actually maintaining a victory. You ignore the fact that no consistency is the key you deliberately threw in the river. You completely reject the reality that you will get stronger in whatever you do day by day, because getting stronger means you can no longer use weakness as an excuse. You want the sympathy of the struggle without the responsibility of the triumph. You are the architect of your own misery, building walls just to complain that you are trapped behind them. And until you admit that you are holding the trowel, the walls will only get higher. So here you are, at the very end of the excuses. The illusion has been entirely stripped away, dismantled piece by piece. There is no ancient curse. There is no vindictive, cosmic entity tracking your every move just to trip you at the finish line. There is only you, the friction of reality, and the terrifying, binary choice you have to make right now. Let's paint the vivid, disgusting picture of option A. You finish listening to this. You feel a hollow sting of motivation. But by tomorrow morning, the comfort of your old identity settles back in. You try something new next month. You take the first step. And then, you hit the very first wall. The software deletes your work. The client says no. The scale violently refuses to move. You look at that obstacle, and that old, parasitic voice whispers, "Whatever I do, I see failure. Does that mean I should quit?" And you nod. You pack up and walk away. You spend the next 30 years exactly like this, starting, stopping, and crying to anyone who will listen about why you always have bad luck. You build a life entirely constructed out of surrendered potential. A life you will inevitably look back on with suffocating regret. You will become an old, bitter architect of a ghost town, telling stories about how the soil was cursed, when the truth is you just refused to water the seeds. Pause for a second. Let the sheer disgust of that reality sink in. Because that is exactly where the lie of why you always have bad luck leads. It leads directly to the graveyard of almost. Now, look at option B, the path of the dark calm. This requires you to assert your conscious mind over your terrified, self-sabotaging self. This requires you to wake up tomorrow, hit the exact same concrete wall, and instead of dropping your head in defeat, you smile. A cold, calculated smile. You look at the failure, and you realize it is just raw data. You finally internalize the brutal truth that no, consistency is the key that opens the door you've been banging your head against for years. It isn't magic. It's math. You sit back down at the desk. The dopamine is completely gone. You type the email again. You do the reps anyway. You expect it to be agonizingly hard. You expect the universe to push back, not because it hates you, but because the universe demands a toll from anyone trying to escape mediocrity. Nobody is going to tell you this, but the friction is a privilege. It is the only thing keeping the weak out of your territory. When you stop asking the victim's question, "Whatever I do, I see failure. Does that mean I should quit?" and start asking the builder's question, "How do I solve this problem today?" your entire reality fractures and rebuilds itself. See how why you always have bad luck operates to completely blind you to this power? It hides the absolute certainty that you will get stronger in whatever you do day by day. If you lift the heavy weight, the muscle tissue tears and grows back denser. If you solve the complex problem, the neural pathways adapt. It is a universal law, and it applies to you just as much as it applies to the people you bitterly envy. You are not uniquely cursed. You are just uniquely undisciplined. So here is the final line in the sand. You can keep using the myth of why you always have bad luck as your heavy shield against the terrifying responsibility of your own potential. You can stay in the cage because the door handle feels too cold. Or you can drop the shield. You can step into the arena. You can commit to a life where you don't regret your lack of trying. The next time you fall flat on your face, do not look at the sky and beg for an explanation. Look at the dirt. Figure out exactly why you tripped. And then stand back up. The curse is broken the exact second you decide to stop believing in it. The choice is yours.